Greetings, everyone. Welcome to Artcasters number 110. And we are here, as always, with my co-host, Joshua Kemble. Josh, who are you and where can they find you?
I'm Joshua Kemble, and you can find me at Quarterly Stories, and occasionally you can find me on YouTube as Joshua Kemble with a K. And you can now find my comic on Tapas, which I still have no idea how to pronounce. So, but it's under Quarterly Stories. Yeah, that's me.
And so you guys are on my channel, so you probably know where to find me. But if you want to know any other social media places, you can find me right here in that little lower third graphic. And we have a special guest today, and well, we always have a special guest, but our guest today is James Koenig, and he is the proprietor, the artist at large for Freelance Fridge, and we'll have him talk a little bit about that. But one of the reasons why we wanted to have James on is because Josh and I are, at least, well, we haven't really freelanced in a while, and I know a lot of the people that watch the show are looking at doing, going freelance full time or whatever, or doing a little of freelance. And sometimes we're kind of like, well, yeah, I don't, and they want to know, how we promote ourselves, how we do all that stuff. And it's like, things change so fast in this industry. So we want to get somebody who's basically freelancing full time on right now and kind of see how he's doing it and how he's making it work and everything. So James, the first thing I wanted to kind of ask was why Freelance Fridge? What's the idea behind the name? I love the name. I love the graphics. You guys, well, tell everyone where to find you and everything, all that kind of stuff, and then you can answer that question, I guess.
Sure. I'm James Koenig. You can find me at freelancefridge.com, and that's just fridge, like short for refrigerator. And then I'm pretty much on most of the social medias, just under Freelance Fridge without a space. I think Facebook might be Freelance Fridge Art, but the rest is just Freelance Fridge. The name itself is kind of arbitrary in a sense. Back when I was creating my initial first website in college, as part of like your routine or whatever, when I was switching away from like a jameskoenig.com, I wanted to do something else because my last name is misspelled and mispronounced all the time, so it didn't really seem like the best web address. And I had this idea that I thought it'd be cool to have a website that was like a retro refrigerator, that essentially you could open up the whole thing and then look on the shelves, and that's where all my art would be. That never came to fruition exactly, but I did go with the retro fridge, and I had links to all my galleries as pages on that fridge, and that's how I had my site for several years. But Google hated it, so I switched over to more of a traditional website layout and everything, so it was more searchable friendly. But I kept the fridge at that point, and I always just loved, I think there's a lot to be said for web addresses that are just two words put together that are easy to pronounce, easy to remember, and things like that. So I wanted to have something that was kind of iconic that people would remember over time, that wasn't like, wait, what was that guy's last name? Or how do you pronounce that made up word, or this or that? So I just felt like it worked pretty well, and I've kind of stuck with it ever since.
Yeah, it's also good because you can usually get all your URLs and everything, and all your, if it's something original that no one else is doing and something that's easy to remember, that's perfect. Because mine's sort of a made-up name, which sometimes that can be helpful. I know in the early, .coms, everyone, even to a certain extent, Google, or a lot of things are just made-up names because no one has the URL for them. But
right.
But it's kind of play off my own, name and everything. So hopefully it's...
Now I feel like a jerk.
No. No, I think it works for me. I love it because, there is some problems sometimes with spelling, because you could say Cirque and somebody might think like circle, so they might want to spell it with a C. So sometimes I have to remind people how to spell it and everything. But it's a lot better than a lot of people that either they use their own name and they can't always get their own name, or they use something that's more common. And every single, you know, place on the internet, it's something different, or it's some weird number, or it's like a, you know, almost like a old YouTube handle or a MySpace handle or something that they've just hold it
it's like
forever.
Design Studio 313 or something. It's like,
exactly.
what was that number?
Yeah. So I wasn't sure the reason why I asked. I always, when I think of it, I think of like, well, you know, that's kind of where a lot of people display their artwork, is on a refrigerator, everything for the kids and everything.
That's part of it too, yeah. And then just kind of like, I kind of go with this like fresh out of the fridge, you know, it's fresh art, it's not spoiled or rotten, it's
I like that too, yeah. No,
fresh
very
and new and everything, so.
Yeah, it's very cool. It's easy to remember, and it's good. When you see, if you go to the website and you see the visuals, you'll get an idea what that's all about. So, so I think one of the main things, you know, I think a lot of people want to know, and we're curious too, back, you know, and you've been doing this for a while too, and how, and just more recently, you've totally gone full-time freelance, whereas before you always kind of were like part-time freelance. Is that the case?
Yeah. There was 2 other times where I attempted to do it full-time and it failed miserably. So this is the 3rd attempt full-time, and I've been doing it full-time now for 2.5 years. Oh, awesome. And I don't really see an end to it. I think it's real solid now. So.
Yeah, and that's, you know, it takes a while to just build that up. But that was I don't know about Josh, but that was kind of the way that I kind of operated too for a while. I had like, I was lucky enough to always have some sort of creative job. Sometimes there are part-time jobs, and then I would freelance on the side. And that's, if you can get those are good too, especially if you're just starting out and everything. So I assume that's sort of the same case with you. And then, you know, then there were times where I was full-time freelance, but it's been a while. I've been doing, you know, game design, or right now, like my day job is doing, you know, I design like rubber stamps and other things for, you know, a company, which that it's always something different and fun, but you know, it's you know, it's not like I still come home and I practically have another full-time job doing my own thing, which I and Josh and I kind of have this, we kind of came to the same conclusion for us anyway, is that we've kind of the idea of just having that job, and it's not for everyone, because some people get burnt out. If they have a creative job, they can go to that creative job and they get burnt out on it, and then when they come home, they don't want to do anything creative. For certain people like Josh and myself, I guess we're okay with that, and we can still do our own stuff on the side. But for us, it's kind of nice. That reason why we kind of moved away from freelance, because we go in, we do our creative job, and we come home, and then we work on a comics, or we work on whatever other, you know, things we're working on, whether it's putting out YouTube videos or whatever. But so that's kind of what we've been doing. But like I said, a lot of people that watch and everything, they you know, they're looking at, you know, how do I break into doing freelance and getting clients and things like that. So you know, I know since you have been doing it for a while, I'm sure a lot of that is just building up name recognition and things like that, and then eventually people start coming to you, and if you get to a certain point, I'm guessing that you've got somewhat of a steady amount of work coming in. That obviously that can always fluctuate, but beyond that, I mean, what do you kind of do in today's age to kind of get your name out there and everything like that, so people can find you as far as promoting yourself?
Well, not to backtrack too much, but just to give you a quick, like, little nutshell background. I've been doing it since about 2003, and I've been doing various art jobs since about that time too. So, you know, everything from vector art type of full-time jobs to game studios to toy companies, screen print shop, things like that. And then just always doing the freelance part-time. So I think the first thing to keep in mind is that if you're wanting to get into freelance full-time, you have to realize that it's going to take several years of doing it part-time before you can even consider doing it full-time. I think that's the biggest issue, is people think they can, you know, spend 3 months prepping a portfolio and then jump into full-time freelance at that point, and you just clientele trying to do that. Even when I had been doing it for 7 years, I tried doing it full time and failed, and had to get another full-time job and give it another shot at another time. Honestly, though, the biggest thing that still is the biggest draw for me as far as finding clients and hearing from clients is my blog. Just having regular posting on the blog, doing some sort of artwork, because I have, I think, close to 600 posts on my blog now, all just various types of artwork and doodles and everything else. Some of it's polished, some of it's not, some of it's past client work, some of it's just stuff for fun. So all of those blog posts, are searchable on Google, and people find some sort of piece of artwork that remotely relates to something they were looking for, and then they contact me saying, hey, I saw this picture you did of an aardvark, and I need you to do one for me, or whatever it might be. So that's the number one thing that gets me more work, is just through those images on my blog.
Yeah.
And then
go ahead, sorry.
In regards to other things, I don't do any of those bidding sites, but there is one of them that's sort of a bidding site, but sort of not, called Freelance, with a D at the end. So not freelancer, freelanced with a D.com. And that one seems to be a little bit more legit of a site. And I've gotten some really good projects through that. And it's not like a pay per bid site. It's kind of like you pay a set fee once a year. And like the top one is like $50, and there's tiers that are below that. But I mean, $50 a year to have unlimited access to all these leads on there is pretty reasonable. So I've gotten some decent gigs through there. But between those two, I don't really have to search too much. I mean, obviously there's social media, which I still feel like I haven't totally figured that out exactly. Who really feels like they have, other than maybe like Jake Parker or something.
Right.
But
yeah.
But I've been doing that whole Twitter, Facebook, Instagram thing for quite a while too, and I have gotten some client work through that as well, but it's not like my main source of finding clientele or anything like that.
So what kind of clients do you usually work with, or do you go after? I mean, one of the things I noticed when looking at your site is that it's like all the cool stuff you want to do. Now, I don't know if that's just the stuff you post, like if you're in a bind or whatever, if you do something for some insurance agency, something, or but it all looks like, cool character design and children's books, and the kind of stuff that most people, myself included, when we're doing freelance, look for. So like I said, I don't know if that's all you do, but it seems you do a lot of it. So it seems like you're able to pick up these gigs that are a lot of fun and that most people find desirable. So I don't know if that's all you do, or.
Yeah, I think mainly what I do now is children's books and character design. I do some vector art, but mostly based on characters or things like that. I do also do some toy development as well. But it's kind of interesting you talk about the stuff on my site being like the things that you always would want to do. And a lot of that is personal work, but a lot of that's client work too. There was a decision I made, which is part of the decision of, I think, why I was able to go into this full time. A decision I made several years ago to do kind of a shift in my clientele, and kind of pivot my business to a different demographic. So what I was doing for years was a lot of just one-off t-shirt designs, or one-off little vector logos or things like that. And a lot of very small projects for screen print shops, or for people starting t-shirt lines, or just little things where it was just one image at a time, and everything was nobody had all that much of a budget and things like that. I'm sure working with screen print clients and stuff, that they always want something cheap, and it's always kind of like trying to drag a little bit more out of them and help them understand the value behind the artwork and things like that.
Yeah.
But
Josh
for me,
probably knows a little more about that than me, but he was able to do pretty well with screen printing, but he kind of went a different route. But yeah, go ahead, continue.
Yeah. But for me, I felt like I was doing the same thing over and over, and I wasn't getting anywhere. Like, it was harder because I felt like I had to maintain a large amount of clients, because each project was just a small piece of my monthly income. And so I made a shift and focused away from the screen print art, the t-shirt art, the vector art, and try to focus more on creating some images and some portfolio pieces and blog posts, and looking for gigs that were illustration based type of things. And so when I was able to make that shift over time, I felt like it was a lot easier to maintain a full-time schedule as a freelance illustrator, because children's book projects in particular are long-term projects. So you don't have to find 25 clients in a month. You're working with maybe 2 to 3, and it's a lot less stressful in that regards.
Yeah.
But there is more stress sometimes, because they are larger projects with bigger budgets, and that can that can put a little weight on your shoulders too. And you don't want to mess it up or make them feel like canceling or something because you don't like what you're doing, or you're taking too long, or whatever else. It takes a lot of scheduling too, getting everything organized on your calendar and all that.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Oh yeah. So I mean, and that's kind of, a lot of times they say kind of if you are like filling your portfolio with like personal projects, I mean, do the stuff you want to do, and that's going to bring in the clients you like. And it seems like that's probably
Right.
what kind of worked for you. But one thing I noticed about your about the artwork and everything on your website is even though it's a lot of like fun character design, there's a lot of different styles that you can kind of look at, and it seems like different projects, like some are more rendered, some are maybe look a little more vector, some look more animated, so there's a lot of different styles there. So and I've heard differing results differing opinions on when you do go into freelance, should you specialize in one particular style. When I was kind of doing what you're doing, where it's like my whole thing at the time was, and this was, now everyone is a character designer, but at the time when I started off, that was my main focus, was character design. So I would do, I would design, like I have a background in graphic design, which I'm sure you probably do as well. But so I would design logos, but most of the logos involve characters, and then after that we'd spin that off into other things, and but usually everything I did revolved around character. So that was kind of my thing. But but I try to do some different looks for different different clients and everything. But it kind of looks like that's what you do. But then there's other people that say, oh, you got to specialize, you got to niche down, and you have to do just one certain style. Like there's certain people that you look at their artwork and you know exactly who that is, and there's certain people that can adapt to different things that clients might want. And I couldn't give a definitive answer on what works better, because I think they both work, and for different reasons. But it seems like you kind of went the route of I'm gonna kind of do, and I'm putting words in your mouth, and you can kind of correct me if I'm wrong, but I want to do characters, I want to do fun stuff, I want to do cartoony stuff, but I want to do different styles within that sort of theme. So
Right, yeah. You're not too far off base. I think for me, I love experimenting, and I love trying different styles and different approaches to things. It's hard for me to want to stick with just one one specific style because I love such a variety of artwork and everything, and I find inspiration in so many different things. And so that's part of it. And then part of it too is I think there's a lot of a need for artists to fulfill various types of styles as necessary. I think I don't know. I think part of it is how things are after the recession, as things have bounced back from things. I feel like having a variety of styles is actually quite beneficial.
Yeah.
As a freelance artist, because people are looking for someone that can fulfill a bunch of different needs and things like that. And then as far as the way that I kind of describe how I do specialize in a sense is I look at my specialization as focusing on illustration-based projects. So projects like you were kind of saying, projects that have a character in it, projects that have an illustration side in it. So I don't really get many requests, or I don't do many projects that are like, oh, I need you to design this pamphlet or things like that. I do get logo design, but most of the time logo design that I do is based on some sort of mascot or character that they want incorporated in their logos. So that's kind of how I at least justify it in my head. I'm sort of specialized because I'm doing stuff that takes drawing talent, illustration kind of character and emotion based things, but I can do that sort of work in a variety of different styles.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think that's smart. Like, I remember my first 2 years of freelance, I kind of made the mistake of just taking whatever work came, and I think everybody does, and it may not have been a mistake because you're just hungry for work.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, like,
you have to get the experience and everything too.
Yeah, and I was one of the foolish guys who, like, I worked a day job for like doing creative for probably about half a year, and then I quit, flipped off my art director and went freelance, and like never went back. Like, I literally did freelance for like 10 or 15 years. But those first 2 years, because of that, you have the floor just drop out from under you, so you're just hungry for work because it's how you're going to keep your roof over your head and stuff like that. So I just did everything. And then I'd post any professional work I did on my site. And then I kept getting this like terrible like vector, like airplane diagram style stuff. And I was like, why do I keep getting this work? And I remember this just sudden realization of like, what do people see when they go to your website? Oh, they see all that vector work I don't want to do. I made a conscious decision to start honing it out and putting in handy like illustration work. And the next thing I knew, like, that's what I started getting for work, because it's like, you know, so the one thing I'd say for anybody who's like kind of working in multiple styles or anything like that is, like, especially if you're a new illustrator or something, just do not like put stuff on your site that you wouldn't want to get. Like, meaning like, if it's not something you'd enjoy doing, probably don't put it on your website. Have it, you know, you can show it if you're desperate for clients, you can show it to clients at the time, like, hey, I can work in this style, I can work in this style. But, you know, the stuff on your site should be all the gems and the stuff you want to work in. So I think that's a smart idea, you know. Like, if
for sure.
Yeah, that's pretty similar to my experience too. Yeah.
So we got a question for James. This is from I'd Rather Be Drawing. James, are you enjoying drawing kids' books? Kevin Cross, who, I don't know if you know Kevin, but he used to be one of the hosts here, and he created the 100 Days of Making Comics and all that stuff. Anyway, so Kevin Cross seemed underwhelmed with the whole thing. Your take?
I really do enjoy doing the children's books. I've only had the opportunity to illustrate one comic book, and I actually feel like I enjoy doing children's books more than the comics, mainly because there's not a billion panels on every page.
Yeah.
But it just fits pretty well for me. I think there's always
I've been able to, at least with the children's books I've done, I've been able to toy around with style a bit on each one. So that's kind of been fun because I've been able to kind of do something a little bit different or a little bit fresh each time, based on what I feel like would be best for that particular story and everything. And I can't say it's always enjoyable, but most of the time it is. There's occasionally times where it can be a little frustrating or whatnot, but I would say for the most part I really enjoy it. It does take a lot of professionalism and a lot of dedication to illustrate children's books like consistently, because like I said, they're long-term projects, and you're dealing, a lot of times you're dealing with somebody that this is kind of the story that they wrote was like their pride and joy. And I do a lot of work for independent authors, and that's even more of a thing you have to be careful with, because they're not only in love with their story, but they're the ones investing the money personally into the project. And so there's a lot riding on it for them. And so there's kind of a finesse needed to really help them feel comfortable, set their mind at ease, and really you kind of have to take a genuine interest in them and what they're trying to achieve in their children's book and everything. But it can be very fulfilling to be able to help somebody achieve that dream of theirs, or even working with a bigger company, having these books come out and things like that. So
yeah, I think with Kevin, his issue is more with the whole publishing world and how they operate and everything. So it might be a little different when if most of what you're doing is directly with the authors. So that might be, that might be what the difference is. But
I have some experience with publishers, and it is a different ball game for sure. I think I keep mentioning the recession, but I think it's affected a lot of things. But ever since then, I feel like publishers have been even more gun shy and more cautious about what they're creating, what they're putting out, what they feel like they want to invest in and everything. And so it can be a little bit trickier, a little bit more nitpicky on how certain scenes are depicted or represented, or what they feel best would be, what they feel would be best for the audience that's going to be reading the book and things like that.
Yeah. So I want to kind of go back real quick to promotion, because there was something I was curious about. So in addition to what you've already discussed as far as the social media and the blogs and everything like that, do you think physical postcards are still viable, or do you do that at all? Or
I haven't done it in several years, but there's, I don't know if you've heard of the Oatley Academy.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But they have a podcast specifically about children's book illustrating on there, and there was an either a creative director or an art director from Penguin Books that says that he still specifically chooses illustrators sometimes based on postcards that he receives in the mail. So in regards to that type of work, I think there's still some benefit. But as far as like just mass mailing people that aren't specific, I don't think there's much value in that. But if you have a niche of a type of clientele that you're looking for, and you really research the top people in that, or who you're supposed to send something to and things like that, I think you could find some benefit in it. But I personally haven't done it. I've considered it, but I just haven't had the need. Like, I've been staying busy enough that I just haven't got around to it, because there's never enough time to do anything outside of, like, the work and the website upkeep and things like that. So
yeah, I think Josh might know Chris Oatley. I don't.
Yeah, I know Chris. We did a couple crossover podcasts with him. the thing I actually think it's a good idea, because like, but I agree with you on like the targeted thing, because where I work, I'll get occasional like postcards from like photographers. We don't use photography. Like the only photography we use is in-house of products, you know, we do that ourselves. So it's
Right.
like, I feel like those freelancers who are like, they're sending me like, you know, their photography portfolio, and it's like a picture of a guy on a motorcycle or something, you know, and it's like, we're not shooting models, we're selling souvenirs, you know, like the kind of
Right.
we need are like people who can illustrate and design. And so like those feel like just kind of blanks that they just fired off, you know.
Mhm.
Whereas like if I get a postcard from like a talented illustrator or designer, then like I'll stick it on my shelf, and it's probably more likely I'll contact that person than somebody sending me like spam. Because
Right.
what I've realized from like, I never realized this, well, I kind of realized it as a freelancer, but I didn't really know until like I kind of sat in the seat of an art director, and it's like you are so bogged down with email. Like 80% of your hope today is to just clear your email. Like you can just
For
clear
sure.
that inbox. Like that's because you're just getting inculcated with tons of requests from different departments, from your own staff. You're checking artwork in-house, you're checking freelance artwork. It's nuts. And so to add another email to that is kind of like you know, there are some people who prefer email, but I think a lot of art directors probably view it as really irritating, because it's like another email and I'm trying to clear my day, you know? So even if they like your work, it's like another thing they have to do. Whereas like the beauty of a mailed piece is like there's no obligation to return, you know? There's no expectation of a return, but it's also nice because I can just sit it there as a reminder, like, yeah, I really like this guy. Especially if it's well timed, you know, send it around Christmas, send it around a holiday, like send it with the theme, personalize it, like you were saying, like do your research, you know, don't send Harley Davidson photography to a souvenir company, you know.
Yeah.
So like that
sure.
kind of, yeah, that's super good. But I also get what you're saying, because I think when I was freelance, I don't think I sent out mailers very often at all. And that's back when mailers were a little more common, you know? So, yeah.
Yeah. I think now that they aren't as common, that's kind of what you're saying, Josh. But the other thing is maybe not postcards, but something physical. Like if you can create, like one time what I did was I created like this little flip book. It was like there's a little Brad, and it was just all my samples of artwork, or something that you can maybe put in a box that there can be a little cool unboxing, because people love unboxings nowadays. But you I mean, you can't. It would get expensive to just send those out to everyone. But if you, one of the tactics that I like is pick the clients, just maybe 10, 15 clients you really want to work for, and just do a bang up job on something that you can send to them and see if you can get some attention from them. I still think in today's age, especially maybe even more nowadays, because not everyone's doing it. You know, I think that might be a good way to kind of, you know, knock down some doors. It's always the, you know, I kind of hate to use this phrase because it's sort of overused, and now it's kind of the opposite of what it means. But you know, that out of the box thinking, you know, just do something different that people haven't seen before and get noticed. And a lot of times that's what you see. Like I know, like, and this is something I you know, I'd like to do in the future if I can come up with a good idea. But a lot of the viral like artwork that gets shared like on Facebook or other social media, it's usually somebody doing some form of artwork that, like, say somebody does paintings by gluing together different colored M&Ms or something crazy like that. That's always the kind of stuff that it's because a lot of the times the stuff that we do, other artists look at it and they say, oh, that's cool. But to kind of get beyond just other artists and just the average person who maybe doesn't really, you know, they would maybe not consider themselves an art fan or whatever, or look at a lot of art, but when they see something like that, it's like, wow, that's something I haven't seen before. So
like
that's
painting negative space of like a portrait upside down, and then
right. Yeah. Well, you know that guy has drawn that image about 100 million times. So you could just go and do all that, and it looks amazing, but he's probably practiced it so many times Like I think I saw, I think it was a painting of Bruce Lee that somebody did like that a long time ago. And he flipped it over, and you couldn't tell what it was till he flipped over. But stuff like that, I've seen people just do this really unique, this unique thing that you haven't seen before, and that stuff just goes crazy viral, and you could build a career off of that if you get something that hits like that. So I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Just as long as it's not too gimmicky, where then you're only known for that, like, right. Oh, you're the M&M glue guy, and then they never really know you for what you want them to know you for.
And also not just known, but that, I mean, if you put something out there and it's not really the type of thing you like to do, but you get known for that, like, because every once in a while, I'll like right now, what I'm doing is I'm trying to build all these little different businesses. Like I'm doing like this pop culture site, and then I've got my kind of Mad Science Supply science-based art stuff, and then I'm doing digital products, and hoping that if I kind of, it's almost more of a shotgun approach, and so far, I mean, I'm just in the beginning stages, but it's working in the way that all of these things are bringing in a little bit of income here, a little bit of income there. It's not enough to live off or anything, but if one of these things takes off, that could be really cool. But if they don't, all these little things add up, and it's kind of, a lot of it's passive. So once I get it done, I put it out there, and then I don't really have to worry about it, and get a few bucks here and there. But so that's kind of one of the things I'm trying to do. But there's so many different ways to go about this, and we're kind of moving away from freelance. Is kind of our topic today. So I apologize for that, but just kind of made me think. But I guess you could kind of take that and apply it to freelance as far as promoting yourself.
Yeah, I think there's ways to connect some of that stuff together. I know when I was doing a ton of vector or t-shirt art type of stuff, a lot of it I was retaining the rights to the work, and so for a while I had a stock art website. So that kind of is what you're saying, like a residual income, but it's still related to something freelance you were doing. And kind of adding some extra little cushion of money, whether it's a lot or a little. Sometimes you can find a way to connect a couple things together like that.
Yeah, and it's a good idea, and this is something I mean, Jake Parker's talked about this, but I think I've talked about it before too. But kind of when you create a piece of artwork, that it should have like at least 3 uses for you, whether it's to post on social media and or put in a sketchbook and sell the sketchbook, or make a print, or different ways that you can use that artwork in different ways to earn income from. Whether it's like, if you've got a big enough following on YouTube, you draw it on your YouTube channel, and then you get some ad revenue from that, and then you can sell the print. And so everything but that's something like what you're talking about, like maybe in the beginning, if you don't have a lot of clients, but the kind of work you want to do, and you're building up that portfolio, and why not take some of that stuff and put it on, like, I wouldn't necessarily recommend putting it on like a Shutterstock or something. I don't know that, I don't. No,
I had my own, I had built my own site. Yeah. You make like hardly anything through those.
Right. Yeah, I would. But I think I mentioned this to you at the Drink and Draw or somewhere, but like I started doing creative marketing. I don't know if you've looked into creative market, but it's a little different. The work you have to put into a product is more involved, because you have to create screenshots, and you really have to market it as an actual product, and so there's more that goes into it. But you can charge more for them. You can set your own price. There's a lot of stuff you do, and I don't know as far as saturation wise. I'm just getting into it, and there's people that started on there that are making tons of money, but they've been doing it for a while. But that might be the way to go, and it doesn't hurt. I mean, there is some time involved, but if you can take those, if whatever you're doing can translate to something that a designer might want to use in in their own designs, because that's usually who shops on there, is other designers that maybe
Right.
are not illustrators, or like people on Etsy who want to use artwork to put on their t-shirts that they sell on Etsy or whatever, or so and if you just go on the website and look, you can kind of see the kind of products. So if you're doing stuff that you think you can fit together as a pack and a nice package, that might be another way that you can earn income on something that, while you're building your portfolio. So
yeah, it doesn't hurt to try.
yeah.
I think the other thing I just kind of wanted to mention, and this is just my personal opinion, but I think sometimes we get caught up on every single thing that we draw has to serve some sort of purpose, whether we're learning, whether we're using it for a product, or whether we're selling it, or this and that. But it's like, when it comes back down to it, we're artists, so like, try to make some time for like just fun projects too.
Yeah.
I think sometimes we can burn ourselves out if like every moment that we put pen to paper, it has to serve a purpose, and then a year passes by and it's like, why am I not having fun anymore?
Yeah. Well,
I think it's still trying to find some, not losing that love for art, like not diving too deep.
Yeah,
You know
I think for Josh and I, that love is comics, because I don't know that we'll ever make any money off of comic books, but I mean, I ran a Kickstarter and I was able to earn a little bit off of that, and and kind of get it out there. So that's something, but that's sort of that labor of love, and that's the one thing we really like. But it's not, I'm not going to kid myself into thinking that there's going to be this huge payoff from creating comics, but it's just something we love to do. So, and there's a lot of stuff we do.
Definitely.
Yeah, I try to do sort of a healthy balance, but really, I mean, all the stuff I do on my own, my personal projects, I love all that stuff that I do. I also have sort of I probably, I don't know if, as far as my marketing skills are as good as my illustration skills, but I still have a love for trying to learn that stuff. And there's so many people that are way better than me, but I still like to build products and hopefully get them out there and market them and see if they can sell. So that, to me, I enjoy doing that as well. So.
Oh, for sure. There's something really rewarding of having some sort of tangible physical thing that you've created, whether that's a book or a toy or a product of any sort. It's kind of nice to have that, whatever that is, that you're building.
Yeah, I think like it's funny because I feel like you kind of hit the nail on the head with the not forgetting we're artists thing, because that was initially that's actually eventually what got me out of freelance. Was I found that I didn't have enough time to work on my own projects, and that was kind of the allure of freelance for me in the beginning, was the idea that I could work on my own stuff and then I could work on client stuff. But I found that most freelancers I know who are better balanced people, are better at balancing this than I was. But for me, I found that if I ever wasn't working on something that made money, I'd just be worried. Paranoid. And so there is kind of so the weird thing is I kind of had to go backwards. I sort of hated in-house work. And so I kind of flipped off in-house work and kind of went and did my own thing, ran my own business for a long time. And then eventually I just kind of got sick of chasing clients and landing clients and constantly, if I'm not working on a project, I have to be hunting for the next project. And even if it's a feast period and you're getting the next client, it's now I got to juggle the next client, and I can't linger on that job because I need that check. I don't know, for me, I found that I didn't really get a lot of personal work done. So that's part of why I kind of that reason alone, just the art thing, is part of the reason I kind of just took a day job, because I'm well, at least I know every 8 hours I'm going to draw some stupid idea somebody comes up with, that I don't want to draw. And then I can, when I'm clocked out, I can draw whatever the hell I want. I like that, you know? I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I totally agree with you on that. Like, and I think it's cool if you're freelancing and you can find that balance. Like, how do you, actually, that's, to me, that's really an interesting thing. Like, how do you find time to work on your own personal stuff when
I don't
it's
I don't always, but when I do have a chance, the only thing I've really been all that relatively consistent with is just keeping like a small sketchbook and doing just little character designs or whatever in it. And it's kind of a stress relief kind of a thing for me to be able to do just something fun like that. I'm a little bit of an anomaly, but it sounds like you guys are kind of like that too, where I could be working 8 hours, 9 hours, or whatever, and drawing for a client, and then as soon as I'm done with work, eat dinner, and then I'm like wanting to draw something for myself. Like, I never really get tired of drawing stuff, so maybe that's part of it. But it is really challenging to find that balance between the client work and then trying to find some sort of time to do something for yourself. And there's times when it's easier than others. You know, there may be maybe you did a good job of scheduling your clientele for the next 2 months, and you have time in the evenings to draw something for yourself, and then maybe the month after that you did a crappy job of scheduling things and you're working way too much and don't have time for the personal stuff. So it's tricky. I don't know if that answers it or not. I'm not good at it, I'll say.
no,
I do a good job of faking it, I guess.
I think Josh and I are in this position right now where, you know, we're doing it. We do our day job, and then we do our personal projects, and now we're trying to bring freelance into it too. So that's another thing on their plate. So that's that's a balancing act. So
for sure. I mean, when I was working a full-time job and doing freelance, I didn't have too much time for personal work. Just to be honest, it was like I was just killing myself with too many hours. I don't know how people can do all three things all the time. I think you kind of have to pick, like, maybe you dedicate a certain day of the week that's like, okay, maybe I can't work on my comic thing like 3 days after work because I have freelance too, but I can work on it one day after work or on Saturdays or whatever. And trying to dedicate some time specifically for that if that's important to you, you know.
Yeah,
but
I think that's a good point. And that brings up another question I wanted to ask, because I think that scheduling thing, that's the main thing. Like for me, the freelance project that I took on right now, it's something that I can do in lieu of what I was doing in my sketchbook. So it's sketches, and then I can convert them to digital artwork, and you know that's just the nature of the project. So I was able to find a way to work that in without really taking up much more time. So just finding the time and figuring out when you can do that. But that leads me into a question that I wanted to ask you, because I noticed on your email when I was corresponding with you, it looked like you kind of had like office hours. And I know going way back to when Josh and Kevin were doing Big Illustration Party Time podcasts, they were talking a lot about that too, is just setting office hours. That's nothing I'd really ever done, but I like that idea. So if on your emails that you sent out, it says these are the days that I work, these are the days I'm available from these times. And so if you don't mind talking a little bit about the idea behind that and how that came to be and how that's working for you.
Yeah, for sure. I try to maintain a decent office hours. It's easier said than done sometimes. I mean, there's just things sometimes that come up where you're working a little bit later than you want to and stuff like that. But I do try to at least get started at 9 at the latest every morning and do my work. And if I happen to not finish something, I might work a little bit past that and stuff like that. But I do think it's important to try to keep some sort of semblance of work office hours. I think too, it's important to specify that in your emails to clients, because in today's day and age, when clients have your phone number and they can text you and they can call you and they can email you, it's easy for them to take advantage of that. And then all of a sudden you find yourself slipping into a time where you're talking to them on the weekend, or you're talking to them like late at night, when it's like, I'm just trying to enjoy time with my wife or whatever, you know. So part of the signature is to try to help curb that a little bit too. So, but yeah, I try to maintain hours, and I try not to overload myself. But again, there's always going to be that time where you misdiagnosed how long something's take, or the client adds something to the project, or things like that, where you're bound to work later than you want to.
Yeah.
So I still don't have that totally nailed down, and I don't know if there's a way to, but for the most part, yeah, I try to stick in that like 45-ish hours a week type of a mentality, and not overload myself, because there was a time back in the day where I was working 7 days a week, full-time job and freelance, like a lot, and I was up to like 70, 80 hours a week, and it was just stupid. And it was not good for marriage. It wasn't good for my health or anything else. So I think trying to find a reasonable amount of hours, and if that doesn't seem like it's going to pay the bills, then either you need to charge more, or you need to get better so you can charge more, or maybe do the full-time job and then just the part-time freelance thing. Yeah, I think that's probably more than you wanted to know on that. But
No, actually, yeah. So, I mean, how difficult is it to get your clients on? Because I mean, I understand the idea of, for your own benefit, setting up working hours, and I've done that. But the idea of putting that out there for the clients and saying, look, because I think it says, you know, I forget which days, but say like Thursday and Fridays, I'm not available because I'm working on this long-term project or something like that. So you're spelling out, you know, these certain days that you can work on stuff for people, which is cool. But I'm just wondering how the people that are looking from work to you, how they respond to that. Are they receptive to that, or are they like, you know, I don't know.
it's tricky. It depends on who you talk to.
Yeah.
And there's always going to be a couple outliers where they're just clients that need a little bit extra attention or special treatment and things, you know, to make them feel good, make them feel confident using you and stuff. But for the most part, I think a lot of times we're afraid to like share anything like that with clients. I think as artists, we always have this mindset that like, any moment in time, people could just say, screw you, and not work with you, and then you don't have any work, and then you're, you know, homeless or whatever. But I think I found that there's not too much pushback when you kind of put things out there, and that's in regards to time frames, but also in regards to what you request in contracts and everything else. Like, it can expand to a bunch of different things where we're always kind of afraid to ask for things, whether that's in a contract or whether that's like, hey, I'd prefer if you just called me during this time, or hey, I only have these days to work, so the project's going to take X number of weeks and stuff like that. And I think you just have to be confident and tell them that's how you work and that's your method, and most people are pretty respectful of that. Again, there's sometimes outliers or people that don't totally get it, but
Yeah.
for the most part, people seem to understand. And I think as you build your talent and your portfolio and everything, the stronger your art is, the more you can give them the time frame of when they're going to get something and then be okay with it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and if they're making an unreasonable demand, just quote them something that'll make it worth your while.
Right.
Meaning, like the neat thing about establishing office hours too is like if you go outside of those hours, then you have a little more standing. If you go, I'm going to have to charge a rush fee for getting it done. As opposed to like if those hours aren't set, then it's like, hey, you're available always. Like you don't have a life. You're a robot automaton who just creates artwork. It's good because it humanizes the process, and then it also like legitimizes if you need to bill extra because they're asking for something ridiculous. Like let's say they call you Thursday and they want it Friday. It's like if you're gonna have to stay up 24 hours to finish and hit a deadline, they should be paying you a little extra for that. That's crazy.
Just a little bit, like $5 extra, maybe.
I would say more. Like that's the great thing about because I used to be I remember that too. Like I remember initially I don't think I've been used contracts.
What?
Stupid, yeah. And then I learned my lesson really quick because I had a client screw me over, And that's only happened a few times in my life where like a client like really hardcore just screws you over. But it only has to happen once to be like, okay, I have to write contracts and all of that. But even initially, I remember being really scared when I'd write specifics in the contract. And then finally being like, okay, anything beyond this will be billed at. And I'm like, oh, that seems like such a large amount. But it's like, no, these are reasonable things. Like you're a human being, you're a business. Business have to charge money, and if you don't, like you'll get raked over the coals and have trouble making rent. So I think that's reasonable to have office hours, man. That's actually pretty brilliant. I tried that a couple times and I never could stick with it because like
it's tricky.
Due tomorrow,
Yeah.
Like at least in my experience, it's pretty much most people when they're hiring a freelance. But then again, I'm sure with like a longer project like a kid's book, it's not quite the case, where it's like I need this tomorrow.
Right, yeah. I went away from a lot of those customer base that need things in 2 days or a week or whatever. Most of my clientele are fine waiting a month or two or whatever. And nowadays they have to wait a long time, but yeah, I think the biggest help for me is to have a scheduling software that works for me. I use I don't know if you've heard of Todoist.com, so like to-do list without the L. That's the one I use, but there's a lot of good ones out there, and just having something where you can organize all your project, you can break down mini tasks for every aspect of the project on certain days and schedule it out for however long you need to do it. And that really helps you, one, not overbook yourself in a week, and two, like maintain some sort of reasonable human being hours per week, like instead of 70 plus or something like that. So yeah, that's been a big help. And then the other thing too is when you have a scheduler kind of thing where you're putting all your projects in there, as soon as you place all the tasks in there for that particular project, then you don't have to think about it anymore. Like it can be off of your brain and you can think about other things. I know I used to try to when I was first starting out freelance part-time, I was trying to juggle all these projects and just remember in my head when they were due or what order they were supposed to happen in and things like that. And it was awful.
Yeah.
So do you use like a task management software, or do you just like take a lot of notes and like have charts and stuff? Like how do you keep track? Like what's your method for keeping track of deadlines? And
well, I've done it long enough where I'm pretty good at knowing how much work I can do each hour or each day and things like that. And then with my Todoist.com scheduler, I can schedule all the projects. And then I do have a program that I'm using to track hours on projects, but I've been pretty good about knowing how many hours projects have taken. That's just kind of to make sure that I'm quoting properly and stuff over time.
Yeah.
But I really don't have too much of an issue with that because I've done it long enough that I kind of know how to quote things and not be working too many hours on something. You know, quoting something at around 3 hours for the project and then it takes 10 or something. That doesn't really happen too often with me.
That brings up an interesting question. I'm sure a lot of people, as far as pricing, we don't want to go into actual what you charge or anything like that. But as far as do you bill hourly, or do you just use your hourly as a basis for a flat rate? Since you're dealing with illustration, do you use usage rights? Do you do full buyouts? Do you piecemeal everything out? How do you go about pricing things in that regard? I guess.
Sure. I basically kind of figure out an hourly rate that I want, and then I bill based on that rate, but I don't actually specify the hourly rate. I just figure out, if it's going to take 5 hours times the hourly rate, then that's the quote that I give them. And I try to put a little cushion in there because there's always something that comes up that throws things off a little bit. But
yeah.
So that's kind of how I come up with pricing. But as far as how I quote customers, that's kind of different in the regards that I don't like to just quote clients one price. Like if they say, "Oh, I need a mascot-y logo thing," I don't like to just say, "Okay, it's X number of dollars." Does that work for you? I always like to give them options. So it's it's at least 2 options usually, sometimes 3. I don't go more than 3 options because then people get confused and it's too many choices. But if you give them options for pricing, like if you say, okay, I can do 3 different style sketches for the logo, and then you pick your favorite one, and then we finalize it, and that's the logo. Or I could do 1 sketch and then finalize it, and that's the logo. And then there'd be 2 prices there, one more than the other. And then what that does is instead of them choosing between yes and no, they're choosing between option A and option B. So no kind of goes onto the back burner a little bit. And I feel like it makes it a little easier to get them on board with working with you.
Yeah, and that way you're kind of also familiarizing them with what you charge, and also offering them options that they can afford, possibly, if they, like, especially if it's like a mom and pop or like a startup or like a person who just wrote their first kids book. They may not have, like, because my wife does kids books, and a lot of the time when people are new to kids books, they don't really quite understand what it costs to hire an illustrator. So offering a little palette of options like that is a really smart idea, because then you can be like, well, okay, so we could do a black and white book for this much, and we could do this short of a book for this much, and that's actually a pretty smart idea, because then it's like you're providing a menu and you're actually like helping serve the client a little better.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard not to name your hourly, because I made that mistake early on, like my first year. And I very quickly stopped making that mistake, because the second you say what you make an hour, it's usually much more than most people make an hour in-house. So they instantly are like, what? Or they try to talk you down, or they try to debate hours after a project's done. Like, oh, well, that didn't take you 8 hours. That took you 4, because I'm omnipotent and I know what you spent on it.
For sure.
So that's smart, because that way you avoid all those pitfalls. That's really good.
Yeah, I'm not really in favor of straight hourly rates for artists, because if you've been doing something for 20 years, you are probably a lot faster to that than somebody that just started. So why would you be getting paid less? If you could do the same quality work in 2 hours that somebody else takes 4, So, but as far as the idea of offering different things, and then they're picking between not, yes, I should do this, or no, I shouldn't, or basically like what you said, James. I mean, what I do, because I always do illustration work, and sometimes it's weird because I also do graphic design, and then sometimes you got to kind of find out where to draw the line, because with illustration, traditionally, you're selling the rights to use that illustration, not actually the actual illustration, unless you write in the contract that way. Whereas graphic design, usually if you design a logo, you just design the logo, and there's no usage involved. You just sell it outright. So sometimes there's a gray area there as far as what is illustration, what is a logo, especially if it has a character in the logo or something. But for me, it's always been a good negotiating tactic to say this is what a full buyout would cost, and it's usually a pretty pricey number, and then like, whoa, but then you explain to them, well, you're probably not going to need all these different rights, and if down the future, somewhere down the line, you do need those, then they're reserved for you. I'm not going to sell it to anyone else, depending on what it is. Most things that you create are only specific to that one person, but or company or whatever. But that way they can say, well, I really only need this for a book I'm doing. I'm not making television commercials or anything. But if that happens, you're going to feel pretty stupid if this thing goes big and you've gave all your rights away, and 9 times out of 10, they're only going to need that one thing. So that allows them to say, well, I only need this. So then they can see that they're getting what they consider a better deal for it. So that's always the way I go about it, or did in the past when I did more freelance. So that seems to work for me. But so what do you offer when you do an illustration for somebody? Do you maintain the rights except for, or say if you're doing a children's book, if they want to make toys or whatever based on that, who owns the right to that? How do you structure that in your contracts, or does it vary?
I haven't dived that deep into things. It's a tricky industry. So currently, when they do book with me, they're getting rights to those characters and rights to the illustrations and everything. And so I'm just billing accordingly to that. It's a tricky thing when you're starting to divide out those usage rights. People get really weary about it, and people get kind of, they feel very uncertain about a lot of that stuff sometimes. So I've kind of kept it simple for now. I know that's something that I probably should look into a little more deeply, as far as usage rights for other things. But what I've found that has actually worked to my benefit is that a lot of these type of illustration clients, like I've done, where once I've created the children's book, then it piggybacks into another project for them, like helping them create a website to promote the book, or helping them create some other promotional illustrations, or helping them develop a toy to go with it or something like that. So I found that in a sense, I'm getting more out of it over time by not like pushing it too much right at the first part, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think depending on who your clients are, I think if you're working with traditional like children's book publishers, they expect that, and it's probably, they're used to that. That's if they were working through an agent, that's what they would add. But sometimes when you're dealing with people that maybe just have their own company or whatever, it's a little hard for them to grasp the idea of, wait, I don't just get everything, that. Mm-hmm. Because if you don't set it in your contract, whether they know this or not, but if you just say, I'm doing this for this price, and there's nothing in your contract that says you're giving the rights to the client, that you're transferring those rights, then you still own them. You still own it. So so in a way, it's good.
That's shady too, because like there's also work for hire, at least in the state of California, where if you do something work for hire, actually it's owned by the person who hired you.
Yeah, yeah.
You basically, the point being, if you're working without contracts, you're getting into shady territory.
Right.
But with the whole usage rights thing, I think that I get what he's saying, because it's not it's not uncommon with like small press publishers or publishers of kids books and stuff to just outright own as work for hire. So you're being hired to illustrate their concept, or like you do like an editorial illustration for that magazine to then own the rights to that editorial. Of course, once again, if you take an editorial gig like that, you want to make sure that magazine's paying more, you know, because you can't sell prints or anything like that. But to me, the only time I've really had to delve into usage rights like heavily is with T-shirts, because with T-shirts, that was always a specification in the contract where it's like, hey, you own the rights for the shirt, and that's it. Now, if it was their concept, I'd usually give them the rights, because it's like, to me, it's like I'm illustrating their idea, whatever, you know. But but if it was like something where I was being hired to do a concept for someone, in those cases, I always would specify like specifically one instance of usage, because I don't want them to make posters of it. I want to make posters of it, you know?
Right.
So it's, I think it really, yeah, the usage thing is interesting. And there's always that big fear, because nobody wants to be that chick who did the Nike swoosh, right? Where I think she got paid like $20. And I think she was a college student. And then like, it was like 20 or 30 years later, Nike gave her a golden Nike swoosh as a thank you. Like, I think it was like 50 years later. Like, they wouldn't even acknowledge who designed it for a while. And, you know, they've made millions, I mean, billions on that logo. And yet, like, you know, she didn't have any sort of specification for it, and I don't think she really got paid a fair wage. But she probably was a college student who was just like, oh, I shouldn't bill a lot, because it's like, you know, there's other designers out there that are really known, and like, you know, I need the gig, I need the money, I need to buy groceries or whatever. So like, that's always, I don't know, that's an interesting thing with usage rights, because it's like, do you end up being the Nike person? I don't know. I think with like, in the case of like, I don't know, I think it really depends on the project, right?
Yeah. The thing is with that Nike, with the Nike thing, you know, since, I mean, in the beginning when she did that, you know, that's how it played out. But since then, Nike's, you know, if they say they find an artist that they really like, that they want to do, you know, they're paying usage rights for everything after that. They're paying, you know, if they find a, like, I mean, you see stuff like some crazy like graffiti style that they want to use. They're paying that artist usage rights probably. That's probably not a full buyouts or whatever, you know. So down the, I mean, when they first started, that was one thing, but then, so you think retroactively they could do something, but it's the same thing with, I just watched a documentary about Siegel and Schuster and all that stuff. And,
oh yeah,
you know, and same thing with Kirby and all that kind of.
Bill Finger.
Oh yeah, Bill Fingers. And yeah. So what was I going to, oh, so the other thing I was going to say, just as far as the thing to think about as far as like doing full buyouts as a freelancer, the one thing you just have to kind of consider is that, you know, I mean, when I work for the company, like my day job, the thing is that's all work for hire, right? I create work, and you know, but the other thing is they're offering me health insurance, they're supplying all the computer hardware equipment, everything that comes with that. But you don't get all those perks when you're a freelancer. So, you know, you definitely want to make it worth your while, and that's why, you know, you know, it might be something to think about if you know, again, it's touchy, especially when people aren't used to that. But if there's a way to, you know, I don't know.
Well, I definitely try to price it with kind of exclusivity in mind.
Yeah.
But I just don't. I just don't get into the nitty gritty of like, okay, well, you're doing this for a book, but do you mind, you know, this or that and stuff like that. So, and it's always tricky with children's books because there's not much you can do with it other than unless you wanted to do some sort of limited print run of a particular illustration or something like that. Other jobs, it's a lot easier to have those conversations like you're talking about. And then as far as if I'm ever doing something where I'm creating several different concepts and then there's only one final concept that's being created for that company or that person or whatever, I I try to reserve the right of all those other sketch concepts that were, the rejects, so to speak.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So that way I can revisit those at another time if there's something that I liked about one of those that I wanted to, elaborate on or something like that too.
Yeah. But I think even if you put something in your contract that just in the event that one of these books gets optioned for like a cartoon or a television series, that if there's merchandise, I mean, you can, if you don't want to sell a certain extra usage rights for that, if you can even attach like a percentage, like a 1% or a 0.5% of anything sold, or just in the event that something happens. And I don't think I can't imagine anyone would be like, oh, I'm not going to give that away, because I don't think a lot of people are really expecting that to happen. And if it does, then they're going to be in a position where, percentage isn't, a small percentage isn't that big a deal for them to part with. And
right.
The chance of it actually happening is slim, but you don't, like Josh said, you don't want to be the Nike girl. So
it's in there just in case. Yeah, I get that for sure.
It's sometimes like my later contracts, because it's been a while since I've done like straight up freelance, except for return clients, But like my contracts, like I had eventually evolved them to the extent where, like for instance, where I put the kill fee in the contract, I would say this is to protect the client as well as the artist. You know what I mean? And like kind of make sure I include caveats like that sort of explain the purpose of it. So, so that it's basically like, look, like if we get this far in the project and I haven't fulfilled the brief, like you don't owe me anything, because I have an obligation to fulfill the brief in the contract, But if I fulfill the brief and then you bail, you owe a kill fee, like that's to protect me and to protect you, Like usually that would work. And the only people I ever found were kind of skeezy about like contracts that weren't crazy, because that's another thing. Like I don't know if it's changed at all, but like doing oh, okay, I guess they did actually make it right with Nike, according to TJ Dupree. Nike, I guess, kind of gave her some stock, which is kind of a good thing.
Yeah, that's what I was saying, because that's nothing for them to do, and they're doing it for other people that are working for themselves. So,
and actually, that stock's kind of a joke for what they'd owe her. But I mean, like if she had done her contract right, they'd owe her far more than the amount of that stock. But still, I guess. Where was I? I got distracted by the chats. Oh yeah. So like with the contracts, like the only clients I ever found were kind of iffy about contracts or committing to contracts or committing, like, basically wanted to argue fees forever. Usually those are the kind of clients you don't want anyway, because like, right. Weeks into the project, you're like, this person's a headache. Like, it's like they usually will shift the goalpost when you're working, and like it can end up being worth more to not have that client. So I don't know.
Right. I think too, you bring up a good point that reminded me. Whenever I'm personally writing a contract, I want to try to keep not only myself in mind, but the client in mind too, because I absolutely hate it when I receive a contract and there's absolutely nothing benefiting the artist whatsoever in the contract, and then I have to go back to them and say, hey, well, you're kind of asking about too much, or you're not even allowing me the right to show the work, or things like that. And so when I'm writing contracts, I try to think about, well, how's the client going to read this, like
exactly.
You're saying, and what's benefiting the client within this too? Because it should be fair. It should be a two-way street. It should be fair for both.
Yeah, and like that's another thing that like I've seen some illustrators' contracts where it's like got absurd verbiage in it, and it's like you don't want to put text in your contract that's going to confuse your client. That's not the goal of the contract, isn't to like bamboozle your client, And if your client reads that, there's a high likelihood they're just going to bail, because you know, you just use common vocabulary, you know, be fair to your client. Like in the t-shirt world, it's very fair if it's, you know, if you're doing concepts to have the rights, you know, outside of like exclusive rights, because that's a one-off industry. It's like you're going to do your run of t-shirts. I'm going to take this, I'm going to make a run of this. I might sell it and make wrapping paper of it, you know, like it's
Right.
like it, you know, but you get the exclusive t-shirt, you know, like, and if it goes out of print, then I can sell it elsewhere, you know, like that's like a common thing in books too, is like, you know, if you write the book, if it's somebody else's book, it's a whole different game. And I think it's more akin to like what you were talking about, where it's like, you know, there's not often like a lot of usage right stuff when it's somebody else's story and they're hiring you to see your vision come through. You know, but like with if it's your own story, then like, you know, a lot of the times it's like you have the right to publish this, and then when it goes out of print, I can publish it elsewhere if it's gone out of print for this long, you know. I think that's a really good point about like trying to consider the client though, you know, because like even with office hours and stuff, like that's always a reasonable expectation, but sometimes like you're going to have a return client or an art director who really likes working with you, and they have an opportunity come up and it's literally due the next day, and they're going to throw it to you. And if you say like, oh, my office hours are this, then they'll be like, okay, well, bye. Like I got to get somebody, you know, you were first in line, you know? And so it's like, I think empathizing with the client is always a good idea. It sounds like you've really mastered that. It took me a while because I was kind of not I wasn't unfriendly to clients. It just, you know, it took me quite a few years to kind of get the flow of that, like empathizing with clients.
For sure. Like you can't just look at the client as just dollar signs. Like this is just a walking dollar bill that's going to help pay my rent or whatever. You once you start humanizing the people that you're working with, and seeing that these are people too with their own set of challenges, their own set of dreams and everything else, like it makes it easier to like empathize with them and know how to talk to them. And I think you really do have to have a genuine interest in the people that you're working with, to have a good connection and to have a good project that's good from start to finish. You know, if you don't care about them and you don't care about the project you're working on, then it's not going to be a good experience. That person's not going to probably come back to you either, you know?
Yeah, and your art will show it. Like if you make art and you don't give a shit, it shows, you know? It's like, I think, so like, which can be challenging because, especially at least from my experience with kids books and observing my wife's experience with kids books as well, sometimes you'll get a script that's like the stupidest story you've ever read, and it's horribly written and there's grammatical errors, and you know the pay is right, but like and the revision requests are like insane. Like you're like, really, you don't want to do like a variety of stuff, you just want to repeat that same stupid thing or whatever it is, you know? And so like the challenge then is like navigating, like, well, first off, like, do you need the job? Do you want the job? And then second, like, what can you get into about it? Like, maybe the story's terrible, but the kid has funny hands or something that you're drawing. So you can like make the whole project about, I love drawing hands. This is awesome. I'm going to draw these awesome funny hands, you know? Like whatever it is that you got to do to kind of psych yourself out and get into it. Because like I think you're right. You phone it in, and then like the likelihood of the client coming back is slim. And then aside from that, like, what if the client does come back consistently and you're always phoning it in? You're just gonna hate that job and that client, you know? Yeah. So that's a really good call, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I think anything that you can do to just make, and this is kind of, I think, what you keep, you know, hammering everyone on is James, is that, you got to make it easy for your clients, whatever, make the process easy to understand. And one of the things that I noticed that you did that I really like, that I haven't seen too much of, but it seems really smart, is that on your website you've got a whole thing with your development process, and you basically lay out what it's like. I've done that before in like contracts and agreements, where I said, well, you're going to get sketches and then this, and this is kind of the process, but you visually lay everything out. You show, this is the first step, you get sketches, and then it goes from there. And if anyone's curious, go to freelancefridge.com and you can kind of see that process. But that seems like really helpful for clients to really know what they're getting into, because it's a scary thing, especially if it's a new client to, I got hire this illustrator, sometimes artists are flaky. Do they, and that shows that what you're doing, that you're professional, that you've done this before, and you're willing to lay everything out on the line, exactly how it's going to happen and everything. So that's something that's really reassuring, I think, to clients. So I think that's a kind of a smart thing. So how does that help? I mean, do you find that putting it out there, I mean, do your clients pay attention to that? And if they do, or do you find that they're better prepared for how everything's there's no surprises really for them? Since you've laid that out.
I think it does help for sure. I implemented that. I don't know when I implemented that. Maybe 2 years ago-ish, 2-3 years ago. And I do think it adds a level of professionalism. I think it does add some transparency. It makes it very clear, like, what they can expect and things like that. I think, yeah, it's important to help. It's important throughout the entire process to help your client understand how it's going to work and things like that. And it's just kind of like the first step is to show them what you did in the past and the whole process, so it's not like a scary thing. And I think too, you make a real valid point about other artists and things like that. I found that there's a lot of people that come into a relationship with a freelance artist with already preconceived notions based on other artists they've worked with.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, there's a lot of artists that either their portfolio doesn't match the artwork that they're giving the client, or they're really flaky, or they just drop off the face of the earth completely. All these different aspects that you kind of have to fight against, and
yeah,
reassure them that, like, I'm not like those other people. Like, you don't have to worry.
To me, it's always a good sign it's always a good time to question when you have a client who's talking about a bad experience with a previous artist. To me, that says one thing or another. It's a nightmare client, or another is that it was, they had a really crappy experience with a freelancer. And I actually found and still find, like, when you get that gig, ask some questions, about their experience. Like if they're talking, the previous illustrator on this, because sometimes they'll expose things that are like, you might be like, you might want to seek other illustrators, because sometimes they'll expose something like they were, they literally thought they owned, like I've had, clients that were really bitter about a previous illustrator who were approaching me, and they're explaining it, and what the illustrator was doing was completely reasonable. They were running a business, and they were trying to kind of like own the person almost like a slave. And there's that out there too.
Yeah, for sure.
More times than not, it was like, they had a client, they had a freelancer like bail on a deadline. And I know from being an art director, that's like literally last straw for me. Like if I hire a freelancer and they miss a deadline and they did not communicate ahead of time that like they needed extra time, they just like were overly ambitious with their turnaround, their promise of turnaround, and drop the ball. I don't care how good the art is, because I'm like in my industry, it's deadline based as well. So it's like, they actually physically hurt my entire art team when that happens. So I get really mad at those people, you know, because I'm like, there's 7 people in house who you just screwed over, you know, and you don't know it. But now they have to work overtime to do your job that you got hired to do. You know, that's how I view it with freelancers. So like, I'm always super sympathetic to freelancers because I freelance for so long when I hire them. But that's my big thing is like, if you promise a delivery date and you don't hit it, like the likelihood of me hiring you back is null. You know, now if it's reasonable and let's say, you know, you're a human being. So like, I don't know, you somebody in your family has something happen or something comes up and it's communicated, it's usually pretty forgiven. But I will say, like, I've had that experience with freelancers. There's a lot of artists and designers, especially young artists and designers, who talk big and think big. Like they think their own capabilities are better than they are. And so they overpromise. And that's a big, like, to me, I think that's, as an art director and also as a freelancer, like that's what I've noticed people experience a lot is like people who fail to deliver on a deadline. And that, to me, that's like that's almost unforgivable.
Yeah. I would say, because we're, I would say we're getting close to the hour-and-a-half mark, but I think that's probably, it really is, and that's the one thing and that may be why I've been successful as, you know, when I was doing freelance and everything, just because, you know, I might not be the best artist or whatever, but I deliver on time and I do what I say I'm going to do. And I think that's probably more than anything, it's probably the most important thing to keep in mind and to practice as a professional illustrator, even more than the art. I mean, it's so important. So, so I don't know if there's, James, if there's anything else you wanted that we didn't cover that you wanted to mention before we kind of let everyone know where they can find us and all that kind of stuff.
I would say just kind of what you're going off of, like, you may not be the best artist you see online or something, but you can still land projects if you're professional, if you communicate well, and you deliver when you say you're going to deliver. So don't let your skill level, like, hold you back from trying or applying to things or whatever else, because there's a lot of gigs where I didn't think I was going to get it, but then I got it for one reason or another, and it worked out pretty all right. So, but yeah, definitely just always growing your talents. Like, it's such a cutthroat thing nowadays, especially with how big social media is and how you can work with an artist halfway across the world if you wanted to. And so you really have to hone your talent and be good at what you want to do, and just always be trying to learn, always be trying to grow your illustration talent, your design talent, whatever it is, you know.
Nice.
Exactly.
And I'm trying to think if there's anything else really key. I don't know. I'm one of those guys that, like, if someone doesn't communicate well, it really bugs the heck out of me. Like, you know, it's like, if I'm giving you this eloquent email with everything laid out, like, do not send me back a 1-sentence vague answer, like, you know.
Yeah, or say something arbitrary like "make it pop."
That's a whole other episode. We'll have to have James back for the nightmare clients or things you have to deal with. So, I mean, I think in this episode we paid clients, painted them a pretty good light, but there are problem clients, and those are always fun to talk about too.
Yeah, for sure. I could talk for hours about that.
Yeah.
But there was one other thing I was going to mention, but I'll let Joshua finish his thought. He was going to say.
I was going to actually just throw in that, like, it would also be fun to hear about, like, some of the sort of personal projects you're envisioning for the future, like stuff you want to build. Like, what do you want?
Oh yeah, definitely.
But that'll be for another episode as well. So,
if he's got one big thing, he can tease us with that. I don't know, and if not, you know, he's got. Oh, I see. You got to talk while you're showing us stuff, or else it won't go to you. So.
Okay, sorry. I've got this little scuba shark guy that I designed the character and then built it in ZBrush and had it 3D printed. So eventually I want to do a cast of this and offer some limited edition figurines of this guy. I have a whole YouTube video tutorial series on how to build a little character like this in 3D, because this is this type of thing that I do for toy development. So
Cool.
That's kind of a personal project that's kind of on the back burner that eventually something will happen with it, but it's just time. There's never enough time.
Yeah. I've never been able to wrap my head around the 3D sculpting, but that's something that I would love to do stuff like that. But I just, I don't know. Either I'm going to have to invest the time into learning it or pay somebody to create something, like show them a sketch and say, sculpt me something of this, which I've tried before with, we can, we're going back to people that don't deliver on what they say. I've had issues like that with characters I wanted other people to sculpt for me, but yeah, that's a whole other story.
Yeah, if you think like Photoshop or something is a complex program, just open up a 3D program and you'll be like, crying.
Oh, yeah.
There's so much to learn, but it's fun. And the one other freelancey thing I was going to say is I have this kind of magic phrase that I use sometimes when I have a client that's a little bit pickier and maybe it's gone to the second revision or the third revision or something like that. Once I send off that last revision that's allotted within the agreement, whether that's the second or third, I'll send that sketch and I'll say in the email, any additional changes may be subject to charge.
Yep.
And for some reason, that phrase is almost magical, and all of a sudden they love it, and it's good to go.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
And there's no more changes.
Yeah.
That's
And
cool right there.
Definitely having that in your contract too, where it says, like a revision limit, because that was one of the first things I didn't have in my first contract was that. And then you'd end up in that infinity loop of revisions, and you have the slave driver, client. And that cuts that short really quick when you say any further revisions billed at this amount. And it's, it's a much higher amount than you regularly charge, and that's basically to incentivize people to communicate clearly. Like you were talking about, James. We'll have to have a whole episode about that, like clear communication. That would be great.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
It's been cool, man. I feel like we could go another like 10 hours, but we should probably call it.
So yeah, James, you mentioned your YouTube channel. So since we usually broadcast on YouTube, let everyone know where that is and your website and any other thing that you want to promote.
Yeah, I think you could just Google Freelance Fridge on YouTube and you should be able to find it. I just have a lot of video tutorials on there I used to do a ton of stuff for vector art, and I used CorelDRAW versus Illustrator for cleanup, which a lot of people think is weird, but it works for me. And so I have a lot of CorelDRAW video tutorials on there, but then I have the ZBrush video tutorial series on there. I eventually want to do some freelancey tutorials or some drawing ones on there, but it's just one of those things where there's just only so many hours in the day.
Yeah.
Yeah, and your website is freelancefridge.com, right?
Yep, and you can pretty much find anything on there. And then, like I said, all social media kind of things is Freelance Fridge, except for Facebook is Freelance Fridge Art.
Yeah,
so
and I would
say, pretty easy to find. And I'm always happy to talk to artists or freelancers. So if you want to shoot me a line through my website, I'm happy to do art critiques or talk about freelance or bounce around ideas or whatever. Like a lot of people get intimidated by artists that they feel are some level above them, but I like to give back because I've had several professional artists do that for me when I was early on, and so I just feel like it's a responsibility to like try to help a little bit with that too.
Yeah, I mean that's the whole reason why we're doing this, besides the fact that it's just fun to talk about art with the friends and stuff. But yeah, I would implore anyone to go check out freelancefridge.com just to kind of get an idea of, like, James is doing a lot of interesting stuff there, like we talked about how he shows his, you know, development process and all that kind of stuff. So it might be interesting if you are thinking about doing freelance, or maybe you want to revamp the way you're doing things. He's doing a lot of interesting things, and there's a lot of artwork to check out in various kind of different styles and looks, and it's fun to kind of just go through everything. So
if you scroll to the very beginning of the blog, like pages and pages into it, you'll see some really crappy stuff.
well, that's always the way it is. But yeah, I mean, it's like just same thing with YouTube channels. You go back to don't go back to any of my first YouTubes, but I you know, it's not like I want to take them down, because it's always interesting to go back.
Yeah, I think it's nice to kind of see the process and see how someone's grown over time and things like that.
Exactly. Yeah. All right. And so, Josh, where can everyone find you?
Well, you can find me at quarterlystories.com, or, well, you can find my graphic novel there, and you can find me at Joshua Kemble on pretty much everything: Instagram, YouTube, .com, all of that. So, yeah, and then Tapas, that's the new thing. So, yeah, that's about it. What about you, Scott? Where can everybody find you? I mean, other than on this channel where they should be subscribed, right?
Yeah, well, I have to talk in order for you to see that, but yeah. So yeah, Serkworks.com. I'm Serkworks on YouTube, and there's still time to get stuff for Christmas if you have any, like, people who are hard to shop for, who are into like science geeky stuff. You can either go to Serkpop.com, which is kind of my t-shirt site for pop culture parodies and things like that. That's the new site. Or all my Mad Science Supply, Serkworksy stuff is at Serkworks.com, and there's a link to the store there. So that's kind of what I'm promoting now. So for the holidays. So everyone who, if you're still around, just to give everyone an idea how this thing works, we rotate from Josh's channel to mine weekly. We go back and forth, and we always have a rotating third chair guest. Today it's James. Next week it'll be somebody else. But if you want to know where to find us, you can go to, there is a link for our newsletter, and we don't spam anyone or anything. But if you sign up for our newsletter, we just let you know where we're going to be, what time, whether, you know, usually we're on Wednesdays, sometimes it's Thursdays, whatever. But just so you know where we're at, you can just sign up for that newsletter, and we will let you guys know when we're ready to broadcast. We usually send that about 30 minutes early. And so, yeah, I just want to thank everyone in the chat. Also, yeah, Evan Moore had some good comments and things that he was, I just didn't have a chance to read it off, so I apologize to Evan. But I do appreciate everyone in the chat. So we will see you guys next week. And yeah, I guess that's it.